and welcome everybody to this session on using MS PowerApps for 19650 compliant asset information management. I did email you guys yesterday with if you did want to download or to access a trial version of the software, then you can log in and I'll put the link to do that. Admittedly, the scope of what I'm going to do is around 7 key skills, which I think are going to give you enough to get properly started in terms of implementing it. And I will probably tell you a little bit about my own journey in terms of doing this and some of the motivations behind this approach. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name's Dave Shepherd. I work for the House of Commons as a BIM project lead, and in that role, my priority is to maximize asset outcomes as it relates to digital construction and BIM. So that's really all I'm about. And essentially, my focus on this has been that I've seen the challenges that people have. If you haven't seen this, then certainly something in my experience, people trying to fill in these Kobe spreadsheets. And Graham here, and I'm going to laugh here, but both of my colleagues here at the front will be smiling to themselves because they know that between Nigel and Graham, they know that I probably have more to say about it than I should in terms of what people go through. I mean, for me, my concern is that why would somebody want to be on site, and trying to fill in a spreadsheet on a laptop? It just doesn't make sense. So once I began that journey, I began to create these Power Apps, which make it very simple and very easy to develop something that actually can run on your mobile phone. And out of that journey, at the age of 60, I became an authorized Power Apps developer, launched an app on the App Source, and it's all kind of spun on from there. But what I want to do is my real focus is democratizing this kind of technology. I think it's something that everybody can get into. I don't think it's rocket science, and I'm going to give you some of the reasons why I think that this is the future, as opposed to proprietary bespoke apps or full stack developers trying to develop applications. I think it's going to be people like you and me being able to use low code, as they describe it, to be able to do something useful, okay? So just a very few things about myself before. So as you can see there, assess achievement of key asset outcomes for the parliamentary estate. I always think that self-praise is no praise at all. So when we say the widely acclaimed BIM management handbook, I almost thought maybe I shouldn't have even put that in, but it's out there in all good bookstores. And maybe the most important thing is just to give you an outline of what we're going to cover today. So essentially what we're going to cover is going to be in 5 key modules. The first bit is, what are the essentials for compliance? What do we have to do to make this thing work? What are the essentials for compliance? The second piece of it is just to give you an understanding of how low code, this very simple but easy to use way of developing applications, is actually becoming a major industry. And it's opening up opportunities for people who are not programmers, people like myself, to be able to create something that's useful. Then we're going to go into the key skills. So there's 7 key skills that I would like to be able to impart to you over the next hour in order for you to be in a good place to be able to move forward with this. I've created a set of videos. I was given the emails of everybody who's attending, so what I will do is after this, I'll just give you access to the videos. You can download them and you can go through at your own pace. So please don't get worried if you feel that you haven't quite caught everything. We'll make this interactive, so if there are points in this that it's really not making sense, let's open up, let's get some questions, let's get some interaction going. let's not just everybody nodding and thinking, when is this going to finish? You know? I probably want to look at Power Automate workflows. So apart from the Power Apps, Power Automate is essentially allowing you to create a sequence of tasks which can do things like approvals, can do things like generate emails in a particular way, all of those types of things. And it all integrates, of course, with Office. So all of those tools that you're already using, it all integrates with SharePoint. And I think it's going to be a really great platform to you to be using. And then finally, we're going to look at some next steps. What are some of the things that you might want to think about doing in order to move this forwards? Okay? Great stuff. So again, just to remind you, if you do, maybe when you've got the videos and you download them, all you'll need to do is to go to this powerapps.com/trial. Essentially, you log in, and you'll have access to the same environment that I've been using to develop these apps. One of the things to notice about that is that the Power Apps is essentially it's probably the longest running free trial that you'll ever get, really. And there's really a lot of help online. You can go on to YouTube and you'll see loads and loads of videos that just help you to get, stuff done. All right, so let's start with the first part of this, which is really looking at the essentials for compliance. Now, again, my experts, Graham and Nigel, will tell you that they know this back to front. They can sort of recite it without even having to open 19652. But one of the critical parts of that is section 5.17, and I'm just going to read out some key parts of this, which is around establishing the project's common data environment. And the key parts is that each information container is to have a unique ID based on agreed and documented convention comprised of fields separated by delimiter. Now, as it stands, we know there have been significant changes. So what was known as volume has been changed to functional breakdown. What was known as levels has been changed to spatial breakdown. But ultimately, those are the fields that we're going to have to generate as tables, which together will then comprise the naming that we're trying to achieve, okay? So what we have to do is create a series of separate tables that represent each one of these fields, populate them with the information, and then be able to bring that together to generate the name that we want. We also want to be able to attach the actual document to it. There's no sense in just having a record and not being able to do that. So I'm going to take you through how you generate that with SharePoint. It's called SharePoint Document Management, but it means that you can actually attach files to the record that matches the naming, and then you can search for those documents and you can open them. Okay, the second piece of this is that, of course, we need to have three other key pieces of information apart from the naming, and that's going to be around revision, status code, and also classification, which in this case will be from the PM table in Uniclass. Okay, so we will be addressing that, but as a starting point, I just want you to be aware of that. We're generating a series of tables that represent each one of the sections that make up the ISO 19650 National Annex naming. We then find a way to bring all of those pieces together into a name, but we also need to be able to have these additional fields around revision status code and Uniclass code. All right? And then the final piece of this, which is quite important, if you have to have the ability for information containers to transition between states, that has to be a controlled transition. So one of the last things that we're going to be looking at is the ability to bring in an approval workflow that when a file is either added or updated, that it immediately triggers an approval workflow so that it transitions between states according to those approvals, okay? The recording of the name, user, and date is essentially the auditing, which is already part of SharePoint. So essentially, that's how I have implemented that particular piece of it. Okay. And you can see there, that's the approval workflow that we'll be talking about a bit later. And this is really, showing this screen is essentially showing you how the controlled access works at the information container level in SharePoint. So the capability is there. And very often when vendors are trying to tell you, well, SharePoint won't do this because it doesn't have these capabilities, actually there's a lot more in SharePoint than people give it credit for. All right? All right, so just wanted to go through some of the key reasons why a lot of people are moving into this low-code world. One of the key things is just speed. You're going to find it a lot faster to be able to create an app than if you were going through the conventional programming route. It just makes it, you've got the templates, you've got the building blocks, you just really have to pull them together. It does mean that you can adapt very quickly, so rather than going back to a programming team, putting in a set of requirements and trying to build a new app, it's very easy to amend and update the app as time progresses. And you need that when you're thinking about agility. And probably some of the others that, the key ones that I would probably bring out would be the fact that it democratizes development. Instead of having to be at the mercy of a development team and for them to say, oh, it's going to take this long and there's this much hours, you can actually bring this in-house and probably create something that's quite useful. But what's also nice about it is that you can scale it from where it is as a low-code app into something that's actually far more robust and far more powerful. So it's very important to have a look at those points. So right, we move to this third module, and this is where we're going to just go through this set of key skills, just keeping an eye on the time. But these are the key skills that we're going to go through. So the first one is, how do I create one of these dataverse field tables? I'll take you through that. And how do we change the column properties to represent each of those fields that you saw before that make up the overall ID for that particular document within the CDE? How do you create then a master table that pulls all of that information together so that you get the overall naming according to the national annex? The third piece is going to be how you integrate SharePoint document management so that you can then not just have the record, but of course you can then drag and drop the file into that record, so you've got the association between the actual file itself and the record that you're using in the Power App. Another piece of this is generating the concatenated name, so we talked a little bit about that. And then out of the table, you're going to see how easy it is to take a table and convert it into an app. And you can actually just push that into Teams. You'll see the examples that I show you. All of the examples I show you of the app are going to be in Teams itself. It is as simple as moving it to Teams. There's just a button that allows you to do that. You may want to explore and customize the interface, so there's a forms capability which allows you to do that. And then we'll talk about the PowerApps flow, which is, as I said, this sequence of tasks which you can automate, and it just makes life a bit easier. In this case, the focus is on review and approval. So the first skill then is really creating a series of these tables around the key fields that are used within the national annex. So I've added file extension because, and obviously I will add in number as well, but I've added file extension here. I know there's number in there as well, but these are the ones that we're just going to create just so that you understand how it's pulled together. But of course, number is in there, and I thought it'd be useful for somebody to put in file extension so that you could then filter the list by file extension. And of course, you need your status code, your revision, and your classification. Yeah? All right, so this is what essentially you're going to be doing. You're going to create a project table, originator table, functional breakdown, spatial breakdown, form, discipline. The number is actually not going to be in these tables. I'm not going to create a separate table for number. You'll see a bit later. When we create the master table that brings everything together, the number will be in that master table. So I don't need to create a number table here. I'll create it when I bring everything together to generate the national annex numbering. And you can see essentially these are the columns. So normally it's the number, the name, the number of the project, the name, and created on is just automatically part of this. All right? So we're going to be seeing a video essentially that shows us how this is being generated for just these 4 particular items. I'll talk you through it as we go along, which is creating essentially 4 tables: project, originator, functional breakdown, and spatial breakdown. What I'm going to start by doing is just giving you an explanation of the interface. So if you've signed up for PowerApps, what you will see is essentially this interface. There's an area for the apps up here, but then the actual tables that you generate are in this area down here. And what you're going to want to do is to create a new table. Fairly straightforward in terms of the capability and what you can do with that. All right? There are also some other choices and things that you can do there. So we go in, new table, we type project table. This is so straightforward, it's just so easy. You can obviously put in a description. What I should mention a little bit further down here is that you can actually, this is where you're able to attach documents to the record. We're not going to do this now, but I just needed you to know where that is. But it's as simple as that. It's based on single line text, and all you need to do is create save. And essentially, you're going to be repeating that task for originator and for all of the other ones, yeah? Within that table, we're going to have 2 columns. If you remember, we've got the project number, and then we've got the project name. So we're typing project number. It's single line text that's going in there. One of the things you'll notice there is the ability to say it's optional or it's business required. So you can control whether that particular field is optional or required. I'm turning on created on. So essentially we've got project number, project name, and created on. What we can then do is create the next table. It's pretty straightforward from here. So originator is the same thing. And I'm going to be creating them for every single one of those fields that make up the 650 naming. All of those fields will be represented there. Again, go in there, I'm going to type in the originator name, save that, and then create a new column and type in the originator code. Because of course, this is going to, it's the actual code that's going to be used to generate the overall naming, yeah? Okay? And again, I'm just going to turn on created on and click on save there. We'll go back and once again, we'll create the last 2 tables. So new table, type in functional breakdown. And again, you can just scroll down. There's a lot of other features in there. I won't go through the detail. Things like being able to attach files to the table like so. But all we do again, same thing again. This is so easy. That's what I mean by low code. You know, it's not rocket science to be able to generate this stuff. And again, we're going to put in the function code and then add a new column, and we just call it the function description. All right? So function is, in a sense, it's moved on from when we used to talk about volumes. We now talk about functional breakdown. And the same thing with the spatial. Probably I should have called that spatial breakdown, but we're doing the same thing. We're putting in a code for it and a description. All right? So I'll just let that go through to the end. And as I said, I'll make sure that everybody gets access to these videos, and then you can go into the free trial and just try some of these things for yourself. Spatial description, click on save, and we're all good. Okay? So hopefully that shows you how simple and easy it is to create those tables. And of course, you'll create them for the entirety of all the fields that are represented, except number, because number is going to be in the master table. It's not going to be generated here. Okay. The next part of this is going to be essentially how to create and populate the tables. So what you're seeing here is if I click on import, what we're going to do is actually populate the table. Now, of course, the other way to do it is to just sit there typing in all that data. But if you're thinking about things like PM codes, it's probably better to fill in a spreadsheet. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. To populate the table, we need to map the fields which are in the spreadsheet, which you can see there, function code and function description, to the fields which are in the table. It's very straightforward. I upload that spreadsheet that you saw with the 2 columns in it. All right? Of course, the first thing it tells me is that there's a mapping error because those haven't been mapped properly. So I choose map columns. This is not rocket science. This is low code. Function description matches function description. Function code matches function code. Click on Save Changes. It tells me the mapping's successful. Imports the data. In this case, it's only 4 items, but it brings in those 4 items, and then if I go to edit the information, it's that simple. Excel spreadsheet, fill in the data you want, match the mappings, and you're good to go. All right? And that's the case for all of the fields. So whether it is things like the status codes, you can fill in a spreadsheet, pull in that information. If it's for the classification, if you've got PM codes that you've downloaded from, for instance, the NBS website, then it probably makes sense to use that and then just bring that into a spreadsheet and then do what I've just done to import it. Okay? The second skill, of course, is now to look at the table that's going to bring all of these different fields together, because we want a proper national annex naming. Notice that the first column is the one with the number. We didn't create a table for number, did we? Because it's going to be in this master table. All of the others, you've got title, but all of the others, you can see it says lookup, lookup, lookup. So it's really reading the data from within the associated table that we're going to tie this into. So let's see how that's actually done. All right? So what we're going to be looking at is not to do the entirety of it. We'll look at the finished product in a short while. But what we're going to have is a field for number, a field for title, project code, and originator code, but those 2 are lookups. Okay, so we're creating our new table. We're going to call it 19650 container naming. And in this case, remember I told you about attaching the SharePoint document management. I'll just show you where that is again. It's a bit further down. Notice that you can control access to it by user or team, but that's what we're going to be doing in the next part of this, is setting up SharePoint document management. Anyway, we've saved our table. So of course the next stage of this is to generate our respective fields within that table, or columns within the table. So this one just needs to be renamed. In this case, we're not going to call it name, we'll call it number. Notice that I haven't particularly changed this from single line text. Sorry, I've just changed it from single line text to auto number, but it won't have a prefix on it, but it will be auto numbering. So every time I create a new record, it essentially increments the numbers automatically, and then I can choose the other fields that go alongside that. I've got minimum number of digits set to 4, but if you are working with 5 digits for your numbering, then you can use that. The next column, of course, is going to be title. So we type in title at the top here. And again, that's single line text, so we'll stick with that. You can put in a description here. Just makes it a bit more meaningful. Title of document or model, I suppose, would be the best thing here. And again, just save. Low code, easy. Anybody here can do it. All right? Here's the one that's a little bit more interesting, because this is how we're going to start to bring in the information from the other tables. In this case, we're going to say project code. We'll choose single line of text and come down to lookup. And then what this allows you to do is to go to the related table, which of course is the project table. Just go down to there and you'll see project table a bit further down. So these are all the tables that I've been setting up. And there's somewhere in there project table which will be selected. So there we go. Project table 2, which is the one that I've just generated. And click on save. That simply means that any of the information that I've put into that table is going to be accessible from here. And then there's just one more. Let's bring in the originator code, because we're then going to use that to build the 19650 naming. Okay, so originator code, and it's going to be the same process as we went through before. Right? Not rocket science, is it? When you think about the kind of prices that vendors are charging for being able to do these things, it's kind of beggars belief. But again, we've created a lookup. We scroll down to the table that we generated before, which was the originator table. We choose that one, and we click on OK. What that means now, which you'll see in a short while, where it says select lookup, look at what happens then, is that if I click on here now, do you see how the numbers from the project table are now accessible within this view? And this is for the originator codes. So in the table for the originators, there will be the full name of the originator, but then the 3-letter code to go with it. And essentially, you can populate the table with those numbers like that. This is an example of one that I've generated. We're going to do this. We're going to be showing how to generate that concatenated name, but I just wanted you to see what the table looks like once you've finished it. You've got all the different form codes. Again, that's a lookup. All of these are lookups. Stop for a moment. Any questions so far? Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
So these master tables that you're creating, would they be per project base, or would they be as a larger company and then?
So the way that I would probably address it is that it's possible to set up the environment on a project-by-project basis. Obviously, you can change the project codes, but there are different ways of looking at it. One of them is that you can apply a filter to the table so that you only see the ones that are associated with a particular project. But essentially, this would be a master table across a series of projects, but then you can filter it to only show the ones that you want. It doesn't kind of make much sense to sort of have a project table that is only associated with one project, even though you can change those numbers all the time. So, but you will filter it accordingly based on the project you're working on.